We are here with Matthew Quick, and I just wanted to say thank you for coming on the show. And I really thoroughly enjoyed um, you and Laura chatting, two writers, two authors chatting about mental health, recovery, the art of writing, the purpose of writing, and you guys got really personal. Um, Matthew Quick is probably at this point, I don't know, you're known for a lot of things, I'm sure, but Silver Linings Playbook was an Oscar-winning uh, book that was turned into an Oscar-winning movie, and I personally had a great attachment to that movie. I love Bradley's character. I love the humanity you brought, and I think you brought something that a lot of people in this world are that they deal with is trying to be authentic in a very established and strong personality family. And you did it really well. The interesting thing is you did it years before you got sober.
Yeah.
Um, uh, which I find to be kind of, it was interesting to hear your whole journey because it sounds, I can almost think of the character. And you said you didn't necessarily write an autobiography, you know what I mean? A
Autobiographical
character based
character.
on you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, but a character based on you. But you did say something interesting. I think is kind of cool. Is that sometimes by writing fiction, you can be yourself hiding behind a character. You would later get sober, and you dealt with a lot of depression. And as you got sober, did you look back at that script and that the way that movie came out and find anything from the character that you had written that you might have been ignoring along the way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I
Were you able
mean,
to
the
reflect
movie and the
back
book
into
are,
that writing?
yeah, the movie and the book are different, so Bradley's character is largely influenced by David's writing, David O. Russell's writing, and Pat in the book is a lot more introspective. He's a lot more introverted. He is less connected to his friends around him. And one of the things that I look back on that time, and particularly that novel, was how much my misconceptions about the world, my alcoholism, they were defenses that were designed to keep me feeling safe, but
Mm,
they also kept the love out. So there were a lot of people in my life at that time that I feel really wanted to help me and love me, but I didn't know how to let that in. And I think Pat, particularly in the novel, but in the movie too, he has this woman who wants to dance with him and love him, and he just keeps
hmm.
running away from her, which is
Yeah,
really
like
comical.
literally
And
running away.
yeah, literally running away.
Uh-huh.
And he's obsessed with his ex-wife who wants nothing to do with him. So he creates this fantasy that is designed to prevent him from having love in the present tense. And I think that was something that was going on with me in a really intense way. Even when I was teaching, there were these older men in the building who were teachers that they were my drinking buddies, and I looked at them
Hmm.
as these guys I drink with and watch sports with. But as I've gotten sober, I recall all these conversations of them encouraging me to write, them taking me aside and making sure I was all right. Like when I was depressed in school, them saying like, "Hey, are you doing all right? Do you want to go out?" And it's this different lens now that I look back on that and saw that, I was yearning for this father figure. I had this father hunger. And there
Mm.
were all these men in my life that were raising their hand and saying, "Hey, like, we want to love you. Like, we want to care about you." But because I was so wounded and I was drinking, and I didn't see that for what it was. And I've actually, in my sobriety, gone back and written letters to these men and reconnected with them, and in a sober way, we were able to have an intimacy that I think they were offering to me in my 20s and 30s when I was drinking, but I was too numbed out to allow that to happen. And so it's been wonderful to reconnect with people in my sobriety and in my humility, and to honor those attempts that were made in some cases 20 years ago, and to see them instantly bloom into affection, love, camaraderie, intimacy, and realizing in a very humble unsettling way that it wasn't the world, it was me. Like I was the one that was preventing
Hmm.
this love from coming in. So that's the first thing that
Wow,
comes to mind.
that's really profound in a world that sort of has made, I think, socially made it difficult for men to connect at that level anyway, for it to be okay or for it to be safe. You and Laura talked a lot about mental illness, and I'll just throw sort of addiction in, how it was perceived in 2008 and how it's perceived now. And I just wanted to ask you, 2008 is when I got sober. One of the reasons I loved the story of Silver Linings is the relationship, because I met Laura the first year, the first
Hmm.
day,
The first hour.
the first
Wow.
hour in a treatment center, and
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Fate.
we've been together for almost 15 years now. Yeah.
Congrats. That's
Um,
beautiful.
and so I was cheering for them.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And I was fully cheering for them. And like so much of Hollywood takes that situation and turns it negative, because I think they think people prefer that story. My belief is that uh, people are more attached to the success stories in sobriety and in recovery from mental illness, depression primarily. And um, how do you think that that's changed? How do you think we've uh, embraced mental health in the last, say, what has it been, 12 years now, 14 years since that book came out, or that movie? Yeah, your book came out.
Well, I think there's, the first thing that comes to mind is, when I talk to young people, and I've written YA books, so a lot of young people write me letters, and even some of my nieces and nephews, they'll just come up and say, "Hey, I'm in therapy," and there's no shame,
Right.
they're just like, it's like, pass me, a piece of paper. They say it's just, there's just no shame at all, and it's remarkable to me. But I have to say, I'm like envious of them, because when I was 18, I couldn't even say I felt depressed, let alone like talking to a therapist would have, there was no way I was going to do that. And even if I had
It's
done that, I would have
huge
never been
stigma.
able to talk about it. So, I see
Mm.
that's a really positive shift. I also think too that men have been given a lot more permission to be intimate with each other. And, guys that I met in the 90s where we only talked about football and beer, in middle life, we're now talking about our mental health. We're talking like, some of my best friends routinely say "I love you" to me whenever we talk.
Mm.
That would have seemed insane to me. I would have been afraid of that in the 90s. Like I wouldn't have been able to
Yeah.
cope with that. So I think that's a really positive shift too. I think men are incredibly hungry to have these conversations. And in my experience, when you open that door with most men, they take that opportunity and they're very grateful for it. And so I think that it snowballs, right? So, one person gets brave, one person risks intimacy, and then that spreads and it helps somebody else. And so that's what I've really seen in my life. This silent struggle in the 90s and the early 2000s seems ridiculous to me now, because
I know, right?
I'll go on TV and talk about my mental. I talk on radio, but in the 90s, I wouldn't even have told my best friend. I couldn't even talk to my wife about it. So I
Mhm.
think that's radical change in such a short period of time, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's works like yours, and I think it is that idea that taking something that's difficult and learning from it and sharing it with someone
Yeah,
becomes the bottom line, as opposed to the shame and trying to hide it away because it doesn't fit into a narrative that makes people comfortable. And I just love the way you share about it. I love your perception on yourself. Now, I will just quickly ask, how long have you been in the Outer Banks?
coming up on 9 years.
Right on. Do you love it there?
Yeah, we do love it. It's rapidly changing since,
I would imagine.
yeah, like most places. So it's in flux, and that makes a lot of local people very very nervous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I lived in a lot of small towns, and any growth, change is inevitable, but it
yeah,
is challenging at the same time.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You guys have to check out the episode and his new book. I did want to talk a lot about your writer's block and then writing a book. And what did you say? It was 6 weeks you wrote this book? We Are the
Yeah,
Light.
well, after doing, years and years and years of
Years and
prep
years of
work.
block.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And also
I
trying to write the book for several years. So
Yeah, so please listen to yesterday's episode. It's a great story. And Matthew, thank you again for coming on the show. We really appreciate you, and we'll come find you for
yeah,
some
please
craft,
do.
some soft
Please do.
show. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
my
Thank you,
pleasure.
Matt.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.